This is the Distinctly Detroit podcast, the only pod that explores why one wants to be in the D. I am your host, Fyodor III, the director of the University of Michigan Detroit Center. Join me as I interview students, scholars, leaders, and innovators about living, working, and loving in Detroit. Our next guest is a singer, songwriter, musician, producer, and instructor. He and his band are well-versed in jazz, blues, R&B, Motown, and classic rock. He holds a master's degree in music and directs the Washtenaw Community College Jazz Band and the Ypsilanti Youth Orchestra. On June 23rd at 8:30 p.m., he and his band will take control of the University of Michigan Detroit Center's Wolverine Outdoor Stage as part of the Concert of Colors. The DDP welcomes Steve Summers of the Steve Summers Band. Thank you, Steve, for coming out. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Appreciate it. We're really thrilled to have you on our stage for Concert of Colors. We're excited. So what inspired you to become a musician?
Probably way back, you might remember a group called the Beatles.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s. And some of that early rock music sort of got me initially inspired. Then later on I went on to study jazz and classical music and other forms.
Okay. So would you say you had a musical background?
Yeah, I would say so. Although my parents weren't really musicians, my dad was actually taught at U of N. He taught at UC Berkeley also, because I grew up in California for the most part. And then relocated to Michigan right around 1980 and started attending Eastern Michigan University. So.
Okay. And how did you learn how to play or write music?
I started mostly with guitar. Guitar is my main instrument, so I took private lessons, and I just did a lot of practicing on my own.
Okay. And what brought you to specialize in jazz and R&B music?
I think just developing it. I mean, I started out with really interested in like more blues and rock styles. Jimi Hendrix was another influence. But and then as I just, developed and kept practicing and got more interested in jazz because it's a little more to it. And then at Eastern, I was actually studying more classical music, so I got into writing music and actually received a master's degree there in 1986, where I wrote a piece for a symphony orchestra, a full orchestra. I think just progressing.
Go Hurons. Eagles now. Yeah. How did you meet your bandmates?
Basically, sometimes I teach at Washtenaw Community College now, where I direct the jazz band. So some of them I have met through there. Because we at WCC we have some college-age students, but we also have older students. Some of them are semi-retired. So occasionally, if a student's really promising, then I'll get him involved with my band. In fact, we have a saxophone player who's he's only probably 21, 22 now. But I've been teaching him, working with him since he was like 14. And he's going to be on the show. And actually, my wife is an excellent vocalist, and she's also part of the band. She was born and raised in Detroit.
Okay.
And her name's Valerie Barrymore.
All right. She's going to be performing with you all as well?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Cool. So how would you describe your creative process?
Well, it really depends on what type of music I'm working with in terms of writing, because I do like jazz-oriented music as well as like modern classical, which that kind of music is often used in film scores. So when I write music, it's always I always try to do something that's somewhat unexpected throughout the music. rather than just follow a strict formula, but try to make it more original and unique that way. And then also tie that in with, in jazz we do a lot of improvised solos, where it's not going to be the same each time. So just always coming up with new ideas or change things a little bit, make it more interesting for the listener.
So what got you into teaching?
Teaching, I had some good teachers, when I was younger, and then just sometimes playing gigs is not that steady, and the teaching is a little more consistent, and also just the desire to just help young people learn. And get them involved in something, positive within the community.
Okay. So what could a student expect from a class, from your teachings?
Well, my main class at WCC is a jazz combo class, which was initially more like a band class, where we just rehearsed, different songs and then went out and did community events. But with the pandemic, it became virtual, so the class is online. And for that, it's a little bit different, where we go in and study a little more the history of jazz, history of some of the songs, and more get into the music theory also of learning which scales to use. So the virtual online class, I think, has been valuable, although I think some of the students certainly miss being able to go out and play together. But now we're starting to incorporate that, where we have optional events, like I'm on the board of directors for the Ypsilanti Food Co-op, and I understand there's a food co-op starting up in Detroit also recently, and they're, I think, in the process of getting a building together. But at the co-op, on the first Friday of each month up in Ypsilanti, we have a First Friday event where different venues around downtown Ypsilanti have music and art. And every first Friday we do live music. And then so with the class, we include that as an option if the students want to come down.
Oh, that's cool.
Participate. So July 1st we'll be doing something. And then we've done a lot of shows too, like right around Detroit. We used to play at a place called the Music Menu, which was right in Greektown. And then played at the Greektown Casino for a little while, a few years back when they had the patio. I remember that. But, so
Okay.
keep.
Okay. Can you describe your favorite performance
Um,
or a favorite venue that you like to play?
Okay. Well, we like to do the festivals. We just did a festival in South Haven, Michigan, which is up, south of Grand Rapids on Lake Michigan. But they had a really nice setup, with a nice stage setup and pretty good sound production. So in general, we like doing the bigger festivals, and it sounds like the one Concert of Colors is going to be a pretty nice setup. So we're looking forward to that.
So another question is there anyone you would love to open for? Any other act or band you'd love to open for?
Maybe the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
That's sort of a long shot. We have actually opened with Valerie, my wife. We have opened for Morris Day.
Okay.
And he was in Royal Oak a few years back, and that was a good show. We also opened for Gladys Knight when she did a festival in Lansing.
Okay.
And we were actually on the Mitch Albom show during the same show as Gladys Knight. So we got to meet her there at the Mitch Albom show too a few years back when he was doing bringing the bands in for the short segments.
Is there any other band or artist you'd love to collaborate with?
Let's see. Maybe Herbie Hancock.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, he's a good one. I like Herbie Hancock. So, what kind of performance can our audience expect for you at the Concert of Colors?
Well, I know they've listed us as doing, some variety, some Motown and classic rock. And then we do have some original material too, which sort of falls in the R&B, sort of more bluesy R&B style. So we have several original pieces, as well as, going to do a little bit of Motown and a little bit of jazz too. We do actually some Herbie Hancock tunes like Cantaloupe Island and Chameleon. So a little bit of variety, but I think we've done, we used to do a lot for WEMU radio station up in Ypsilanti, based out of Eastern, and they used to always have events where often they'd have jazz groups in the afternoon, and then we'd be sort of like, in a way, sort of the party band at the end of the headlining the thing. So it sounds like the setup is somewhat similar, because I know a lot of people that have jazz groups that are playing before us on Saturday, like Marianne Hayden from Straight Ahead. In fact, we had her up at WCC as a guest a couple of years back. And then another band leader, Paul Vornhagen, has like a Latin jazz band. And, we know him pretty well too. So it sounds like a great lineup.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited. So, as a music teacher, whatever, what kind of advice do you have for aspiring professional musicians?
Okay. Other than practice, it's getting that experience, is very important. Getting out, playing with other people, and because you can practice sometimes a lot on your own, but then you get in a situation, with a group where it's a little bit different, and it's important to get that experience. It's also really important to listen to what's going on around you. And for students, that's sometimes difficult because they're so, focused on what they're trying to do with their solo or whatever, that they sort of lose and don't really pay attention to the other musicians around them. So especially in jazz, it's very important to listen to the other musicians, and so I think those things are pretty important for students.
All right. Well, we're going to transition into what we call our lightning round, where we ask, this is the series of questions we ask every guest as a means of compiling that data, so to speak, for our listeners to hear all of the different responses or varieties of what's going on. But the first question is, how do you practice self-care?
Okay. Self-care would be, like I mentioned before, I'm on the board of directors at the Ypsilanti Food Co-op, so pay close attention to my diet and exercise regularly with usually walking and light jogging, 30 to 45 minutes each day, and be sure to get enough sleep too, because as musicians usually used to staying up fairly late, but
and sleeping in.
Exactly. So as long as I get my 7-8 hours, I go to bed at 3 and wake up at 10. That's still okay.
What are you reading?
I read. Not really reading any books per se, because often I'm so busy reading music. And practicing and stuff and working on new compositions. But I definitely, just with the internet, I try to stay up on the New York Times and the news, and just stay aware of what's going on in the world.
Okay. What are you listening to?
Listening to the different kinds of jazz, because for the class we work a lot with learning about the history of jazz and the older style. Lately I've been listening to some of the organ jazz trios like Groove Holmes and Jack McDuff, because we have a keyboard player that's actually, he's 75 years old, but he's been taking the class, and he's basically an ex-professional musician. And he had some health issues, but he's getting back into it. And he plays like a lot of keyboard organ style. So some of that, and I've also been listening to some of the modern classical music that I similar to what I compose, and those would be like classical composers like more like Ludoslavsky and John Cage, and actually some of the music has been used in some films, like 2001 used some of a composer named Ligeti. They used a lot of his music in 2001, and also, like I think in The Shining, they used some of his music. So some of the modern classical, and then the jazz, was keeping up on.
What are you watching?
I did watch the basketball finals.
Okay.
And I'm not really, my wife is really big into sports. I do follow basketball, but I don't really have time to do much with the others. But then I grew up out in California in the Berkeley, Oakland area, East Bay. So sort of glad the Warriors won, although they've, I think it's their fourth time in the last 6 years or something. So.
Yeah. It's a little excessive, yes.
But
okay.
and then I watch a lot of YouTube videos too, just to keep up with the different music and the news.
Got you.
CNN.
Cool. Not Fox. Good.
Right.
When you get opportunity to hang out in Detroit, where do you like to hang out, if at all?
Often like like Hart Plaza, like the Jazz Festival. We always like to come down for that. And then sometimes over by the River Walk, through that area.
Mm-hmm.
Go down through there.
If a friend of yours were coming to town to visit the city of Detroit, what's the place you recommend they have to see while they're here?
Okay. Yeah, probably the River Walk and Hart Plaza, downtown area. That's probably what I'd recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, my last question is, where can we find you?
You can find me at, I have my own website, which is StephenHSummers.com, because there are quite a few other Steve Summers around. One guy was a sportscaster, pretty well known. I think he recently retired. And there's actually a Steve Summers band in France, and there was one in England. So the website's Stephen H. Summers, try to differentiate. I also do a lot on Instagram with Steve Summers Band, and I have actually my own production company called Alley Records, and based out of Ypsilanti. So Alley Records, Ypsi is Instagram site, and then a Stephen H. Summers, and then do quite a bit on Facebook too, with Steve Summers Band. It's on Facebook, and a little bit on TikTok, but not much.
Okay.
So keeping active with the social media.
Oh, you're real active. I'm not even on TikTok yet. Okay. Okay. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Steve Summers of the Steve Summers Band. They're going to be performing on the Wolverine Outdoor Stage as part of the Concert of Colors 2022 on Saturday, July 23rd at 8:30 p.m. I encourage you to come on out and see us and join us. We're going to have 2 days of great music, and Steve's going to close us out on Saturday, and it's going to be awesome. And we want to thank our sponsor, Slowe's Barbecue, located at 2138 Michigan Avenue, and Slowe's to Go at 4107 Cass Avenue. Check out some of the best barbecue in Detroit, and say hi to Brian Perrone, a U of M alumnus, who's graced our show and agreed to sponsor us. And we're thrilled to have you come out today, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Really appreciate that.
All right. Again, this has been the Distinctly Detroit podcast, the only pod that explores what makes one want to be in the D. You can get us anywhere you get your pods. Please rate, like, and subscribe. And see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Distinctly Detroit podcast. This is a production of the University of Michigan Detroit Center, and you can find us anywhere you get your pods. Please rate, review, and subscribe. This podcast is directed and produced by Marlon Franklin, edited by Taylor Henniger, with writing contributions by James Neely and Leah Allen. Thank you for listening.